The Formula One paddock is heading to the penultimate race of the season at Interlagos. Amid political protests that threaten to cancel the race, Brazil is going to be a feisty affair with plenty still to play for. The track itself is legendary as it's provided some of the greatest races in the history of the sport. But this year, there are plenty of drivers that are not looking forward to the race. Why is the Brazilian Grand Prix getting criticism? And who is the least excited to race there? Stick around and you'll find out. Max Verstappen is the first of the drivers on the grid who's been complaining about the race in Brazil. The reigning world champion has criticised the sprint race concept ahead of the final Saturday dash of the season this weekend in Brazil. The two-time champion won both sprints in Imola and Austria earlier this season, as well as the first ever sprint race at Silverstone last year. But despite his successes, the Red Bull star believes the fact that the finishing order in Saturday's 100km dash sets up the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday results in drivers unwilling to take risks. Every time I do these races, it's about don't get damage, make sure you stay in the top 3, said Verstappen. For me, that's not really a race, because you go into the main race and you know there are way more points available anyway. You just risk a bit more there. You do another start, which is exciting, but it's only really people who are out of position that move forward, because only you put a tyre on that just lasts a whole stint and not much happens. The 25-year-old prefers the traditional weekend format ahead of the final sprint of the season this weekend at Interlagos, insisting the extra race is not needed. I don't understand what the problem is for that, because we've had so many exciting races, so you don't need to add 1/3 of a race distance, Verstappen said. Everyone is so careful anyway, because if you're fighting for third and you have a little touch and you drop to last, you know your Sunday is going to be tough. Probably you won't risk it, so that's not really a race. Unfortunately for Verstappen, F1 has announced plans to double the number of sprint races next season to 6, meaning 25% of the race weekends in 2023 will involve the Saturday dash. Venues for the 2023 sprint will be confirmed at a later date. As unexcited as Verstappen may be for the sprint race, all the teams agreed to the increase in sprint races for 2023. We understand where he's coming from. The sprint races are a bit of a farce as no one wants to damage their car, start from the back of the grid, or even worse, have to miss Sunday's race because of damage. Max's teammate Sergio Perez has also been critical of the format in the past. I think the format itself, it doesn't make much sense. Practice 2, the way it is, I think that's something that drivers and teams tend to see as a bit useless, because it's not like you can prepare for anything at that point. You cannot prepare for the sprint and you cannot prepare much for the race. Everyone is saving mileage, so I think that's something that can be improved. Sergio's point about free practice 2 is a good one. On that Saturday morning, before the actual sprint race, there isn't actually much point in the cars going out. Between qualifying and the F1 sprint, teams are only permitted to change or adjust suspension elements, that's springs or dampers, or alter camber, toe or ride height of suspension components, defined in Article 10.3 of the technical regulations. So no changing wings, no trying different parts to see what works best on that track. It is a problem that could be addressed by swapping qualifying with free practice 2. That would put the qualifying on Saturday instead of Friday though, detracting from the idea that there are 3 days of racing instead of the normal 2. Maybe you have a better solution to make the Saturday practice more relevant. Steiner suggests that qualifying for the sprint and the Grand Prix should be 2 separate sessions, calling on F1 to eliminate the Saturday morning practice session. This year in Austria, we scored points in both the sprint and in the main race, so for sure, I like that, Steiner said. It's a race like any other, but it's shorter and with 8 drivers rather than 10 scoring points. I'm in favour of more sprints as it makes the overall race weekend interesting by having qualifying on Friday. What I'd like even more is having qualifying for the sprint on Friday and qualifying for the main race on Saturday morning, as the free practice currently isn't very meaningful to anyone. Then on Saturday afternoon you have the sprint, followed by the main event on Sunday. Do you think that could be a good solution? Let us know in the comments what you think. Going back to Max's comment about the sprint race being a waste of time because of the drivers being worried about crashing. The counter-argument to that criticism of the sprint races ahead of the Brazilian Grand Prix is in fact the sprint race from last year's Brazilian Grand Prix. The World Championship was at stake for both Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, but the former had to start at the back of the grid due to penalties. In the 24-lap race, he managed to make up 15 places in what's been described as one of the best drives of his career. Hopefully, this year's sprint race is just as exciting. For Lewis Hamilton, though, he may struggle to have as impressive a weekend this year as he did last. Mercedes strategy director James Vowles expects his team to have a tougher time and Ferrari to bounce back at the Formula 1 Brazilian Grand Prix compared to Mexico. Ferrari clearly lost form last weekend as the Italian team made compromises to ensure reliability at the high-altitude track, leaving Mercedes clear to take the fight to Red Bull. However, while altitude is still an issue in Brazil, it's not as extreme, and in addition, the lower downforce levels won't favour the W13 as much as Mexico City did. Vowles says that an update package introduced at the US Grand Prix and then completed with the new front wing in Mexico was also a useful boost for the Brackley team. I think there were a few factors that came together at the same time, he noted in a Mercedes debrief video. The first is that we put a large update kit on in Austin, and that did move us forward, and that evidence was even more present really in Mexico. The second is that we're very good when we're running maximum downforce, and others running maximum downforce as well. And that was evident in Zandvoort, in Budapest for example, and it was no different in Mexico. The huge pit straight at Interlagos, as well as the run from turn 3 to 4, means that teams will have to run with significantly less downforce or risk being passed by cars with much less drag, and therefore much higher top speed on the straights. Mercedes' attitude this season has been never say never though, and despite Vowles downplaying the team's chances in Brazil, he says there's still a chance of a result. In Brazil, it's a track that both of our drivers have typically gone well at, and there's a sprint race where we can pick up more points. And when you have a car within a few tenths of your competition, you can make things happen. So that is Red Bull and Mercedes who aren't looking forward to the Brazilian Grand Prix. What has the McLaren team got to say about the penultimate race of the season though? Lando Norris expects that the Interlagos circuit will not suit McLaren's car for this weekend's Brazilian Grand Prix. McLaren are locked in a close battle with Alpine over 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, with Alpine only 7 points ahead with 2 rounds remaining. Despite outscoring Alpine in 4 of the last 5 races, Norris does not expect Brazil to be a strong race for the team. I wouldn't say Brazil is going to suit us at all with the balance of the car and our struggles, said Norris. I think even the last few races, we've not been the quickest car or quick enough. We've just done a better job with the strategy and with reliability to at least get to the checkered flag. What might be in McLaren's favour though is Daniel Ricciardo's recent form. Despite only finishing 7th at the Mexican Grand Prix, the Aussie won the Driver of the Day vote for his outstanding drive, starting 11th on the grid before dropping back to 13th and then putting in an excellent drive to climb up to 7th and win the midfield battle for McLaren. There may be plenty of teams and drivers not looking forward to the Brazilian Grand Prix, but for us fans, it's always a treat. The atmosphere is always amazing for starters. There are also battles still going on all over the Constructors' Championship, with 2nd, 4th, 6th and 8th positions still being hotly contested. In the Drivers' Championship, the battle between Perez and Leclerc for 2nd is very much still on, as is the battle for 4th between Russell, Hamilton and Sainz. Even with both championships already won, there's still plenty to get excited about. Which battles get you most excited for this weekend? And want to know more about what's happening in F1? Then click the link on the screen and I'll see you there.